I almost ended this story at episode 12. 12 felt like the right number. 12 tribes of Israel, 12 disciples, 12 gates in the New Jerusalem. There's a completeness to 12. But then I remembered Jesus and his 12 disciples made 13. And actually, if you think about it, there were 13 tribes because Joseph had 2 through his sons. But really, it's just the number of a full table, a teacher and his students, a center and the circle around it. Even the apostles recognized this when Peter took the place of Jesus in the group, and they drew lots to replace Judas, and Paul took up Peter's place. And I remembered something else. When I was a young teenager, lost in the astral plane, I was part of a group. 13 of us. Rachel and I were supposed to be the guardians of the others, the other 11, fighting battles and dreams against forces we thought we understood. We really didn't understand anything. We were children playing with fire, and some of us got burned. Afton died, others scattered. The coven was a counterfeit of something real, a distortion of a calling I wouldn't understand for another 20 years. But the number stayed with me, 13. The one that doesn't quite fit, the bridge between worlds. So I figured I'd continue to 13 to honor this, but also because apparently God wasn't done telling it yet. And I'm sure he's not, still, but for now. Not long after I found my parish, they held a ministry fair. Tables set up throughout the hall, each one representing a different way to serve. Lectors, Eucharistic ministers, youth groups, Knights of Columbus, the usual spread. I walked through, browsing, trying to feel out where I might fit. And then I couldn't move. I was standing in front of a table with a sign in Spanish. I couldn't read most of it, but one word definitely stood out. And it looked like charisma, a charismatic ministry. My stomach dropped. I tried to walk away, told my feet to move. They would not cooperate. Please, I prayed silently. Please do not do this to me again. Don't tell me they're wrong too. I had been to a charismatic church before, been very much into that church. I heard the prophecies, saw what they said were healings, though I never actually saw a healing. Watched people speak in tongues, and I had watched the pastor's family at that same church speak prophetically over people while a voice in my heart quoted Matthew 7. Not all who say, Lord, Lord, will enter into the kingdom of heaven. I didn't want to go through that again. I didn't want to find another community that looked like it was on fire for God, but was actually just on fire. But my feet wouldn't move. The leader of the Spanish group noticed me standing there and came over to talk. She may have been Spanish, but she spoke perfect English. So she came over and asked, "Do you know what the charisms are?" And I took a deep breath. I might, but maybe I have it wrong. Oh, well, most people think of charismatic personalities, she said, but we're actually referring to the spiritual gifts. My heart sank again, even further. God, I really love this church. Please don't. I couldn't bring myself to say I wasn't interested. Instead, I said, "Oh, yes, I thought that's what it was. I've been a part of a church like that before. Thank you." And I tried to walk away. But she kept me there until the English leader came back, and I could not quite move still. So when the English leader came back, I had to sit there and talk with her. And just like that, found myself signing a piece of paper just to get them out of my hair. And then they called me just before Halloween that year and roped me into coming. I thought that was kind of ironic. Halloween, Samhain, if you don't know, they're the same date. Here we are again. And I thought about it. Maybe there was a reason God was trying to encourage me to go. I literally could not move from that table until the English leader came by, and I didn't feel comfortable leaving before I signed up for the information because she was just so persistent. Maybe that's a Southerner in me. I don't know. But I want to be clear about something. I still don't fully agree with charismatic theology before we get into the next phase of this. The belief that every believer has access to all the spiritual gifts, prophecy, tongues, healing, all of it, just doesn't sit right with me. Paul himself wrote that the Spirit distributes different gifts to different people. Not everyone is an eye. Not everyone is a hand. The body has many parts. But you know what? I can still pray with them. I can show up and I can be present in prayer. And something happened in one of those meetings, one of those earlier meetings, that I couldn't quite ignore. We were gathered in a room, the prayer group doing what prayer groups do, and I had a vision. I saw the main chapel at night, music playing, prayer teams stationed throughout, people coming forward for prayer, for healing, for whatever they needed. And there I was, not leading anything, not on a prayer team, just collecting papers from the pews, cleaning up. The vision ended, and now right after this vision, I heard a door shut behind me. Instinctively, I looked, and there was one of the priests. He had only been with the church for about 2 months at this point. The instinct to look behind me came from a combination of my abuse as a child and my military background to check all possible dangers. I had this insane thought, though. Maybe I should tell him about my vision. And when I say this was insane, I really mean my immediate thought right after was, that's insane. I'm way too new to this church and have only recently come back as a full Catholic, which, by the way, meant I had to prove I was previously baptized and get the church to accept my marriage. I was, all of that stuff. So I actually had to get my certificate from my original church. So I was new to this whole church. My vision literally meant nothing, and I didn't know if I could believe it was a vision. So I corrected the thought. Only if he comes in will I tell him. Guess what? He walked in about 30 seconds after I thought that. No, too coincidental. Sure, I hadn't seen a pastor come in to one of these groups in the last four to five times I'd been here, which is only four to five times by this point. But it would be wild to believe he wouldn't want to check in on the ministry to make sure that they were not doing anything crazy. So while he was in there, we prayed, and then he asked the group leader if he could say a few words. She agreed, because of course she's going to agree. Priest is talking, you're not going to deny the priest, right? So the priest talked about a hope he had, a dream for the charismatic group. He wanted to start hosting nights in the main chapel, music, worship, prayer teams available for anyone who needed ministry. And I couldn't help but laugh. Everyone looked at me. I had to explain that I had just seen exactly what he was describing. I don't know why I said these next words, but I said, I feel like God is going to bless the event. I didn't tell him that in my vision, my role was picking up papers from the pews after everyone leaves. But that did end up happening. It's still happening. Didn't even really connect it until a couple of weeks after a couple of times that we'd gone in there that I was doing this. But every time I'm able to attend, I help clean up afterwards, just like I saw. God has a sense of humor, and apparently my spiritual gift might just be tidying up. A couple of weeks after this vision in the charismatic group, I heard a voice. I was at Mass, and the reading included the word talent. And clear as anything, a locution rose in my heart. I gave you a talent, and you've done nothing with it. I wanted to dismiss it, wanted to chalk it up to my mind making connections that weren't there. And it hurt. And I tried. I'm like, but I've been trying. I don't know what to do. But then over the next 24 hours, things kept happening. Small confirmations, nudges, the kind of coincidences that stop feeling like coincidences when they stack up. And alongside the conviction about the talent, another weight settled on me. The church where I had heard, not all who say, Lord, Lord. See, here I was just thinking that the talent was my story. But then this came up. The pastor and his wife who had prayed over me, prophesied over myself and others, prophecies that were either too safe or flat out never happened. And while that verse echoed in my spirit, I had never told them what I had heard. And then that pesky Ezekiel passage came back to me. The one about the watchman. If I see danger coming and don't warn people, their blood is on my hands. But if I warned them and they didn't listen, well, I've done my part. Maybe I was supposed to go back. Maybe I was supposed to deliver the message directly, even if they didn't want to hear it. And that thought terrified me. But it also terrified me that I hadn't done it for Afton. But here was possibly another opportunity to do what God asked. I called a friend, a Protestant from my online spiritual community. Yep, same community since episode 2. Someone I trusted to help me think through this. We'll call her Rosalinda. I laid out all my concerns to Rosalinda. Maybe I was getting it wrong. Maybe I was misreading the whole situation. Maybe I was about to make a fool of myself, or worse, hurt people who were genuinely serving God. Maybe the trauma of Afton wasn't resolved like I thought. She listened to all of it, and then she said, if you're really supposed to tell them, God will open that door. Okay, that was fair. I could test this. If the door stayed closed, I'd have my answer. So the next Wednesday, I drove towards their church. On the way, I got delayed. Police everywhere, raiding a trailer on the side of the road, making it really difficult to slow down and move over at a reasonable pace. So I moved slowly through, watching for anyone that might be running away or trying to get to their patrol vehicles, wondering if this was God's plan to make it so I missed the pastor. But eventually, I got through and I kept driving. When I pulled into the parking lot, another car pulled in at the exact same moment. It was the pastor and his family. They were late too. We arrived at the exact same time, to the second. And I had been talking with Rosalinda to get courage. So I hung up with my friend, and she had reminded me of something. A sower plants seeds, but that's all the sower's role is. It doesn't make the seeds grow. It doesn't control where they land or whether the soil receives them. Maybe that was my role here. Plant the seed, and that's it. I took a breath, and I got out of the car. The pastor was happy to see me. His family went ahead into the church while he hung back to talk, and with a big smile and warm greeting, genuinely glad I'd come back. Well, you may not be happy after I say my piece, I told him. His smile went to concern, genuine concern for me. I told him about the voice, about the verse I kept hearing while they were praying prophetically over people. Matthew 7:21 through 23. Not all who say, Lord, Lord, will enter into the kingdom of heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? And in your name drive out demons? And in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Unfortunately, the pastor doubled down immediately. You couldn't possibly understand, he said, voice raising in anger. We're exorcising demons here, prophesying over people, seeing healings. He had started walking toward the church to join his congregation. Now he turned around. Please, I said, just read the passage. This is God's message to you. That's all I came here to tell you. I never want to see you again, he said. And you won't, I called back. Not out of anger, but because suddenly I remembered a story in the Old Testament. A prophet who delivered a message to a king and was told never to return. Some messages are one-time deliveries. You say what you came to say, and then you leave. Of course, the pastor wasn't done, and he walked back towards me. You know what your problem is, Allie? You didn't want to leave that online community. You didn't want to leave it behind. You didn't want to embrace God, and you suffered for it. I didn't tell him I was still part of that community. I knew it would only poison whatever ground the seed might find. He left, and I stood alone in the parking lot. God, I prayed under my breath. I hope this was the right thing to do. I hope I got it right. I'm sorry I couldn't be the right messenger for him. Please send him another. I had some time before I needed to be home, and so I drove to the Adoration Chapel at my parish. I needed to sit with Jesus for a while. I needed to process what had just happened. And as I pulled up, I looked down at the passenger seat. There was a Bible I had grabbed before leaving the house that afternoon. It was still wrapped in plastic, brand new, never opened. So I unwrapped it and I held it in my hands. There's anything, Lord, you can offer me, I prayed. I'll take it. I let the Bible just fall open where it was going to fall open. And there on the page in front of me was the parable of the sower, the farmer who scatters seeds. Some fall on the path and birds eat it. Some fall on rocky ground and springs up quickly but withers in the sun. Some falls among thorns and gets choked out, and some fall on good soil and produce a crop, 30, 60, 100 times what was sown. And that he who has ears to hear, let him hear. I texted Rosalinda back. I said, it went about as well as I thought it might. But here I am, and when I opened this brand new Bible, completely untouched since it was manufactured, it opened to the parable of the sower. I even took a screenshot and sent it to her. I had planted a seed. That was all I had to do. And where it landed, what kind of soil it received, whether it would grow or wither or get choked by thorns, that wasn't up to me. I had done my part. I still attended the Charismatic nights at my parish, and the prayer group meetings became harder to make it to. Life got complicated as it does. I was in another transition, trying to find a new job, trying to figure out what came next. But the chapel nights, those I make when I can. And yes, I still help clean the pews afterwards, just like the vision. I don't know what my spiritual gifts are. I'm not sure I ever will, this side of heaven. Maybe I'm a bridge, someone who stands between worlds, between communities, between ways of understanding God. Maybe I'm just someone who shows up and tidies. Maybe both. What I do know is this. God gave me a story, a strange, messy, over 20-year story where I am now 40 that doesn't fit in neat boxes. A story with an angel shrouded in darkness. A pagan god who bowed, with possession and prophecy, and a fisherman who waited 2 decades to catch me. And he didn't give me a story to keep it to myself. Again, I'm 40 years old now. The Israelites wandered the desert for 40 years before they entered the Promised Land. I've wandered too. Through the astral plane, through Okinawa and Hawaii, through military service and sacred ceremonies, through poverty and cancer, and gods who taught me forgiveness, so I could find my way back to God, to a God who never stopped waiting. I don't know if my wandering is over. I suspect it isn't. The promised land wasn't the end of the Israelites' story either. It was the beginning of a new chapter. Battles still had to be fought, land had to be claimed, mistakes still had to be made and repented of. But Joshua stood before the people and asked them to choose. If it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites whose land you dwell. And then Joshua himself declared, "But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." I was given grace to make my own choice one more time, and I've made it. After everything, after the angel, the visions, Afton's death, Rachel's silence, Spencer's Reiki and Holden's curses, Ingrid's pain, Ku and Ho'oponopono, and Mary appearing to a shaman in a dream. After the fisherman finally caught me, and the prodigal finally came home. After all of it, I choose our Father, the God of gods. Not because I understand everything, I don't. Not because the church is perfect, it isn't. Not because I have all the answers about spiritual gifts or charismatic theology or why I spent 20 years in the wilderness. I chose him because he chooses humanity. Because he sent an angel when I was 16 and waited patiently while I ran in every other direction trying to figure it out. Because he used a Hawaiian god to teach me forgiveness and a non-Christian shaman to deliver a message from Mary. Because he let me wander so that I could learn that the other gods don't care about humanity the way he does. Because when I finally stopped running and turned around, he was already running towards me. That's the end of this chapter, but it's not the end of the story. I still have life. And season 2, it's going to be different. Less testimony, more exploration, theological deep dives into things I've discovered along the way, prophecy, spiritual gifts, the questions that don't have easy answers, and beyond into new studies for future seasons. But this season, this was about showing you how I got here, why I approach God the way I do, why I can sit with mystery without needing to resolve it, why I can hold firm convictions without needing everyone to agree. If you made it this far, thank you for walking with me. And if you're out there wandering in your own desert, wondering if God has forgotten you, wondering if the experiences you've had are real or if you're losing your mind, I promise you, you're not alone. And the journey isn't over. Keep walking. He's waiting. I am Alethea, and this is Wandering Sinai.